Power isn't always loud. History's most influential figures didn't always rule from thrones or command armies. Some changed the world simply by mastering their own minds. Think about it. While kings waged wars and corporations chased wealth, a group of thinkers from ancient times quietly outmaneuvered them all. Stoics like Marcus Aurelius, a man who ruled an empire yet wrote privately about the power of self-control, proved that real strength isn't about force, it's about clarity, resilience, and an unshakable inner compass. He once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's the quiet war the Stoics won, not with swords or wealth, but with wisdom so sharp it cut through the noise of power itself. This video is about those hidden battles, the moments when Stoic thinkers, from slaves to emperors, faced overwhelming pressure and emerged not just unscathed, but untouchable. How did a philosophy born in ancient Greece become the ultimate playbook for outsmarting kings, corrupt systems, and even modern corporate giants? The answer lies in a set of strategies so timeless, they work just as well today as they did 2,000 years ago. Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about seeing reality clearly, refusing to be manipulated, and turning every obstacle into an advantage. And here's the surprising truth. You don't need authority or riches to wield this kind of power. You just need to think differently. So let's step into this world of quiet resistance. We'll uncover how Stoics disarmed tyrants with logic, how they turned setbacks into fuel, and why their ideas still terrify those who rely on fear and control. Because this isn't just history, it's a toolkit. Whether you're facing a demanding boss, a chaotic world, or your own doubts, the Stoic approach offers something revolutionary: the ability to stay calm, think clearly, and act decisively, no matter who or what tries to throw you off course. By the end, you'll see why the quietest minds often hold the most power, and how you can start cultivating that same strength today. The quiet war wasn't fought on battlefields or in boardrooms. It was waged in the minds of those who refused to be rattled. While kings and corporations tried to control people through fear, status, or force, the Stoics realized something revolutionary. True power comes from mastering your own perceptions. Imagine a chess player who doesn't just react to their opponent's moves but changes the entire game by staying 3 steps ahead. That's what Stoic thinkers did. They didn't resist tyrants with rebellion or outspend greedy merchants, they outthought them. Take the slave-turned philosopher Epictetus, who famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." His owner could chain his body, but never his mind. While others scrambled for wealth or titles, Stoics like him focused on the one thing no ruler could take away: their ability to choose their response. This wasn't passive surrender, it was strategy. When the Roman Emperor Nero demanded absolute loyalty, Stoic senators like Thrasea didn't scream or beg. They simply lived by their principles so unshakably that their silence became louder than any protest. Now compare that to today's world, where outrage and reactionary battles dominate. Social media thrives on knee-jerk arguments, corporations bait us into endless consumption, and modern politics feels like a circus of performative conflict. The Stoic approach flips all of this on its head. Instead of meeting manipulation with more noise, they used disciplined awareness. When a bully tries to provoke you, refusing to play their game isn't weakness, it's leverage. This is why Stoicism terrifies systems built on control. A person who can't be goaded into anger, intimidated by threats, or seduced by empty rewards becomes unstoppable. Modern marketing preys on impulse. Stoics trained themselves to pause. Leaders demand blind obedience. Stoics asked, why? The quiet war wasn't about overthrowing systems. It was about rendering them powerless by refusing to feed their illusions. And that's a battle anyone can start fighting today. No army required, just a mind trained to see clearly and act deliberately. The Stoics' greatest weapon wasn't defiance, it was detachment. Not the cold, indifferent kind, but a razor-sharp clarity that sliced through illusion. Epictetus, born in chains, understood this better than anyone. He taught that suffering doesn't come from external events, but from our beliefs about them. Picture a hurricane. The storm rages, but the eye at its center remains still. That's cognitive detachment, the ability to stand in chaos without being swept away. His famous handbook opens with a simple rule: some things are within our control, others are not. The Stoics didn't ignore reality, they reframed it. When a tyrant threatens you, the threat isn't under your control, but your fear, your response, that's your sovereignty. This mental division changes everything. Ancient kings relied on fear to govern, but Stoics like Epictetus turned that strategy against them. If you can't be threatened, you can't be controlled. He wrote, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. Imagine two prisoners in a cell. One obsesses over the injustice, while the other studies philosophy. The bars are identical, but their experiences couldn't be more different. That's the quiet rebellion transforming prisons into classrooms. Modern life bombards us with pressures designed to trigger reactions. Viral outrage, manipulative advertising, the constant chase for validation. The Stoic response: pause, ask, is this within my control? A traffic jam can't be wished away, but your frustration can. A toxic boss's words are their choice, your self-worth isn't. This isn't passivity, it's precision. Like a surgeon refusing to operate with a shaky hand, Stoics trained themselves to act only where their agency truly mattered. Detachment becomes power when you realize most battles are illusions. The Roman Senate thrived on drama, but Stoic senators like Cato would simply decline to participate. Their silence wasn't weakness, it was a refusal to fuel petty games. Today, think of the coworker who thrives on gossip. Engaging gives them power, indifference disarms them. Epictetus put it bluntly: if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. The lesson isn't to stop caring, it's to care strategically. A Stoic doesn't ignore injustice, they focus energy where it can actually create change. Social media algorithms thrive on knee-jerk reactions, but what if you responded like Marcus Aurelius journaling at night? Today I escaped anxiety. Or no, I discarded it because it was within me. That shift from victim to architect is how you turn detachment into liberation. No kings or corporations can compete with a mind that chooses its battles. Seneca faced a tyrant with a weapon most rulers couldn't comprehend: unshakable calm. As Nero's advisor, he stood at the heart of imperial power, a court dripping with paranoia and violence, yet refused to play by its rules. When the emperor demanded flattery or erupted in rage, Seneca responded with measured words and deliberate silence. It wasn't defiance in the usual sense. There were no grand speeches or public denunciations. Instead, he mastered the art of composure, turning his demeanor into a shield. Nero, who thrived on fear and chaos, found himself unnerved by a man who couldn't be rattled. Imagine a boxer throwing punches at fog. No matter how hard he swings, his target remains undisturbed. That's the power Seneca wielded. His letters reveal the strategy behind this quiet resistance. A man's as miserable as he thinks he is, he wrote. By refusing to internalize Nero's cruelty, Seneca drained it of its force. when the emperor staged elaborate humiliations, forcing senators to grovel or punishing dissent with exile. Seneca treated these acts like bad weather, inconvenient but not personal. He understood that tyranny feeds on reaction. Deny it that fuel, and the system starts to starve. Now fast forward to a modern office where a volatile boss belittles employees to assert dominance. The instinct might be to argue back or shrink in fear, but the Stoic approach offers a third path: steady, unflinching professionalism. Like Seneca, you can acknowledge the words without accepting their weight. A simple, "I'll take that into consideration," delivered with calm eye contact, disarms aggression far more effectively than confrontation. Corporate bullies, like ancient tyrants, crave drama. Composure denies them the spectacle they are after. Seneca's greatest lesson wasn't just about survival, it was about reclaiming agency. In one famous incident, Nero falsely accused him of conspiracy, a charge that typically ended in torture. Seneca's response: he requested writing materials to draft his will. That simple act, choosing dignity over desperation, stripped the moment of its terror. Today, when someone tries to intimidate you with false accusations or public shaming, channel that same principle. Pause, breathe, respond on your terms. The irony is that composure, often mistaken for passivity, is profoundly disruptive. Systems built on chaos rely on predictable reactions: outrage, fear, submission. Break that script and you expose their weakness. Seneca didn't overthrow Nero, but he proved something more enduring: that the quietest resistance can be the most subversive. Because when you refuse to play by their rules, you force them to confront an unnerving truth: their power was never absolute. It was always borrowed from those willing to react. Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire with a pen in his hand and silence on his lips. His private journals reveal a startling habit: he listened far more than he spoke, treating words like precious currency to be spent wisely. In one entry, he writes, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary?" That question became his filter, stripping away impulsive reactions and leaving only deliberate communication. While other leaders drowned their courts in noise, empty threats, flattery, dramatic proclamations, the Stoic emperor understood something radical: silence isn't absence. It's presence under control. Think of a chessboard where every spoken word is a move. The more you talk, the more you reveal your strategy. Marcus mastered the opposite approach. When senators came to him with gossip or demands, he'd often respond with measured silence, forcing them to sit with their own words. The effect was profound. Without opposition to push against, manipulators found their tactics crumbling. Like a mirror reflecting their intentions back at them, his quiet composure exposed the emptiness of their games. This wasn't just imperial strategy, it was a survival tool. The Stoics lived in a world where a single misspoken word could mean exile or death. Silence became their armor. Philosopher Musonius Rufus, arrested and dragged before Nero, was asked if he feared execution. He replied with silence so unnerving, the emperor backed down. No defiance, no pleading, just a stillness that refused to feed the spectacle Nero craved. Modern psychology confirms this power. When confronted with silence, most people rush to fill it, often revealing their true motives or insecurities. Now consider how often we're baited into unnecessary conflicts today. A colleague takes credit for your idea in a meeting. The instinct is to interrupt, correct, defend. But what if you let the silence linger after their claim? Without your reaction, the weight of their dishonesty becomes palpable. Or imagine a social media post designed to provoke outrage. Responding fuels the fire, silence starves it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Sometimes that means refusing to give them the battle they expect." Here's the challenge. When was the last time you let silence do the heavy lifting? Not the awkward pause in conversation, but the intentional quiet that disrupts manipulation. The Stoics didn't avoid speech, they weaponized restraint. In a world addicted to noise, choosing when not to speak is its own rebellion. Your voice matters, but so does your ability to withhold it. Because the right silence at the right moment can echo louder than any argument. Epictetus didn't just endure oppression, he weaponized it. Born into slavery, his body belonged to his master, but his mind became a forge where hardship was hammered into strength. Every obstacle, he said, is an opportunity to practice some virtue. Picture a blacksmith turning raw iron into a blade. The blows of the hammer don't weaken the metal, they shape it. That's the Stoic art of resilience. When his owner twisted his leg until it broke, Epictetus didn't crumble in self-pity. He observed, "If you break my leg, you'll only make my character stronger." The cruelty meant to break him became the very thing that honed his philosophy. This mindset flips coercion on its head. Most manipulators, whether ancient tyrants or modern corporations, rely on a simple formula: apply pressure, wait for compliance. But Stoics like Epictetus rewrote the rules. They treated pressure as training. Imagine a tree in a storm. Rigid branches snap, while flexible ones bend and rebound. Modern workplaces thrive on similar tactics: urgent deadlines designed to panic, guilt trips masquerading as teamwork, or the silent treatment meant to isolate. The Stoic response: breathe, ask, what can this teach me? A rushed project becomes a chance to practice focus. A toxic colleague's behavior reveals what not to emulate. Even unfair criticism, when sifted for truth, sharpens self-awareness. Corporate culture often mistakes endurance for passivity. But true Stoic resilience isn't about swallowing abuse, it's about metabolizing it. Think of a judo master using an opponent's momentum against them. When a boss demands overtime to prove loyalty, the employee who calmly sets boundaries, "I'll deliver this by Friday morning," reclaims agency. No defiance, no drama, just an unshakable commitment to their own values. Epictetus put it bluntly: if someone hands you a cup and you drop it, they get angry. But what if they handed you their grief? Would you take that too? Modern manipulators hand us their anxiety, their greed, their impossible standards. Resilience means catching only what serves you and letting the rest shatter at their feet. The brilliance of this approach lies in its invisibility. Systems built on coercion depend on visible struggles: the employee who burns out publicly, the customer who rages at poor service. Stoic endurance denies them the spectacle. Like a deep-rooted plant drawing nutrients from barren soil, it thrives where others starve. Consider the whistleblower who documents unethical practices without emotional outbursts, or the employee who counters gaslighting with dated emails and calm repetition. Their power comes from refusing to play the game on anyone's terms but their own. Epictetus' greatest lesson wasn't just survival, it was alchemy. He taught that the weight meant to crush you can instead become the foundation you stand on. Today, that might mean transforming a layoff into a pivot toward meaningful work, or using a competitor's smear campaign to highlight your integrity. Resilience isn't gritting your teeth through pain. It's the quiet realization that the chains others try to bind you with can, with the right mindset, become the tools of your liberation. The manipulator's mistake: they assume control comes from external force. Stoics proved it always grows from within. Kings built palaces to project permanence. Corporations erect skyscrapers as monuments to their influence, but the Stoics saw through the facade. What looks like control is often just theater. Marcus Aurelius, despite wearing the imperial purple, wrote candidly about power's fragility. Think of the court of Augustus' royal courtiers, royal freedmen, and now all long dead. Nothing lasts. That wasn't cynicism, it was clarity. While rulers obsessed over borders and taxes, Stoics focused on the truth no edict could alter. All external authority is borrowed, temporary, and ultimately an illusion. Consider Nero, who believed his whims dictated reality. When he ordered Seneca's death, he assumed the act would erase the philosopher's influence. Yet here we are, 2,000 years later, dissecting Seneca's wisdom while Nero's name symbolizes tyranny. The irony: those who cling hardest to control often understand it least. Modern corporations repeat this mistake, burning employees out to hit quarterly targets, as if human potential can be neatly quantified. But just like ancient emperors, they're building on sand. Markets shift, loyalties fade. The harder they grip, the more slips through their fingers. This illusion works both ways. We overestimate others' power over us too. A manager's bad mood feels like a storm we must weather. Social media metrics dictate our self-worth, but Stoics would ask, who's holding the strings? When Epictetus taught, "No man is free who is not master of himself," he wasn't dismissing real oppression. He was revealing its limits. Your boss can fire you, but they can't force you to resent them. A platform can ban your account, but not your ability to create. The moment you recognize most control is performative, you reclaim agency. Try this exercise. List 3 areas where you've overestimated someone else's authority over your happiness. That promotion you didn't get, did it truly define your worth? Or was that a story you accepted? The influencer whose approval you sought, do their standards hold any real weight? Like stagehands keeping a play's illusion alive, we often prop up others' power through our own belief. Strip that away, and the set collapses into what it always was: plywood and paint. The Quiet War's final frontier isn't resisting control, it's seeing through it. Because when you stop mistaking influence for inevitability, you spot the cracks in every throne. Whether it's a king's decree or a corporate policy, no external force can govern your inner world unless you grant it citizenship there. And that's the ultimate rebellion, living as if you're already free. Marcus Aurelius wore the crown of an emperor but thought like a philosopher, a contradiction that made him one of history's most subversive rulers. While other leaders amplified their power through intimidation or spectacle, he quietly dismantled toxic systems from within. His personal journals, never meant for public eyes, reveal a startling truth. The man who commanded legions also wrestled with his own ego, writing, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be." Be one. That tension between absolute authority and relentless self-doubt became his secret weapon. Where Nero burned Rome to feed his vanity, Aurelius rebuilt it by questioning his own motives each dawn. Consider his morning ritual. Before donning the imperial cloak, he'd list the flaws of those he'd meet that day: a petty senator, a greedy merchant, then remind himself, they act this way because they don't know better. My job isn't to punish their ignorance, but to model something higher. This wasn't passive tolerance, it was strategic leadership. Toxic systems thrive when met with equal toxicity. Aurelius broke the cycle by refusing to play. When advisors urged harsher taxes to fund wars, he slashed palace expenses instead. When rivals plotted against him, he promoted them to roles where their ambition could serve Rome. Like a gardener grafting poison ivy onto fruit-bearing vines, he transformed threats into nutrients. Modern organizations could learn from this paradox. Imagine a CEO who treats quarterly losses as Seneca did Nero's tantrums, acknowledging the problem without absorbing the panic. Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle becomes the way," a principle that turns crises into curricula. A tech giant facing ethical scandals might hire critics to lead reform. just as Aurelius appointed his harshest detractors to judicial seats, or consider a manager inheriting a toxic team. Instead of purging dissenters, they could channel Aurelius' approach. What's bad for the hive is bad for the bee. Redirect gossipers into mentorship roles. Convert cynics into quality control specialists. The brilliance of his method lay in its invisibility. Most revolutions fail because they declare themselves too soon. Aurelius' rebellion was quieter, 1,000 small corrections masked as tradition. He kept the titles and ceremonies of empire while hollowing out their corruption. Modern parallels abound: the professor who maintains academic rigor while grading compassionately, or the startup founder who rejects growth at all costs to prioritize employee well-being. Like Aurelius, they prove that the most effective challenges to broken systems often look like compliance until you notice the results. His journals return repeatedly to one idea: you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Mortality, not morality, was his compass. Leaders obsessed with legacy cling to control. But Aurelius ruled as if each day might be his last, which meant ruling as if power were already gone. That's the ultimate subversion. No edicts carved in stone, no dynasties demanded. Just a man sitting alone each night, ink on parchment, quietly dismantling tyranny by first erasing it within himself. The lesson for today: real change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it steps softly in a philosopher's sandals, asking simple questions until the throne itself becomes obsolete. The Stoic no isn't rejection, it's redirection. Seneca, the philosopher who navigated Nero's court, mastered this art. His letters overflow with a quiet radicalism, the power to decline without defiance. Picture a river meeting a boulder. It doesn't stop or rage, it simply flows around. That's the essence of Stoic refusal. When a tyrant demands compliance, arguing back often plays into their script. But a calm, unshakable no shifts the entire dynamic. Seneca wrote, "If you live in harmony with nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to opinion, you will never be rich." Boundaries to Stoics weren't barriers. They were the architecture of integrity. Consider a modern parallel. Your manager pressures you to falsify data for a client presentation. The instinct might be to explode in protest or cave in fear. Seneca would suggest a third path: clarity without combustion. I understand the stakes, you might say, but I can't endorse misinformation. Here's an alternative approach that achieves our goals honestly. No anger, no apology, just an immovable line drawn with respect. This works because manipulators feed on emotional reactions. Deny them that fuel and their leverage evaporates. Like a tree refusing to bend in a storm, your stillness exposes the fragility of their pressure. The brilliance lies in what the Stoics called assent, the conscious choice to engage or withhold your cooperation. Seneca described it as holding your opinions lightly, so that if someone demands them, you can let them go without struggle. Imagine a coworker dumping last-minute work on your desk. Instead of resentful compliance or aggressive pushback, try, "I'm committed to doing this well, which means I need realistic timelines. Let's prioritize together." You've said no to being overwhelmed without saying no to collaboration. History's most powerful no often wore the guise of calm repetition. When Thrasea, a Stoic senator, opposed Nero's excesses, he didn't stage protests, he just stopped attending debates he deemed corrupt. His absence spoke louder than any speech. Today, that might look like declining to participate in a toxic group chat by quietly exiting, or responding to unethical requests with the same unflinching phrase, "That doesn't align with my principles." No drama, no debate, just a door closing so softly it echoes. Seneca's final lesson on refusal cuts deepest. we suffer more in imagination than reality. The fear of saying no to a boss, a peer, even a family member often outweighs the actual consequences. Stoics train to distinguish real chains from imagined ones. Your employer can fire you, but they can't force you to betray yourself. That power remains yours, so the next time someone tries to hand you their crisis or compromise, remember, you're not being difficult by setting limits. You're doing what Seneca did in Nero's shadow, proving that the quietest no can be the most revolutionary. Stoics didn't just endure hardship, they reverse-engineered it. Picture a martial artist sensing an opponent's lunge, then pivoting to redirect that energy into a throw. That's the essence of Stoic reframing, taking the weight meant to crush you and using it to propel yourself forward. Epictetus, who transformed slavery into a classroom, put it bluntly, difficulty shows what men are. For Stoics, adversity wasn't an interruption of life, it was the curriculum. Consider the Roman practice of damnatio memoriae, where emperors erased dissenters from history by destroying their statues and records. When this happened to Stoic senator Pausanias Agrippinus, his reaction was revelatory. Instead of protesting, he treated the erasure as liberation. Now unburdened by reputation, he could focus solely on integrity. Modern parallels abound. A musician blacklisted by an industry gatekeeper starts self-publishing, only to discover creative freedom. An employee passed over for promotion uses the snub as motivation to launch their own venture. In each case, the obstacle didn't just disappear, it became the launch pad. This mental judo works because it exposes a hidden truth. Most power structures rely on predictable reactions. Bullies expect fear, algorithms thrive on outrage, corporate cultures bank on compliance. The Stoic flip denies them the expected response. When Seneca was exiled to Corsica, he didn't lament lost status, he wrote his most enduring letters and studied the island's natural wonders. His biographer noted, he turned banishment into a research trip. Today, this might look like treating a layoff as paid time to recalibrate your career compass, or viewing a rival smear campaign as free publicity for your authenticity. Try this reframing exercise with any current challenge. First, identify the pressure point: a demanding client, a financial setback, a toxic relationship. Now ask, what skill could this situation help me hone? A micromanaging boss becomes a lesson in emotional regulation. A failed project reveals hidden strengths in damage control. Even physical pain, which Stoics like Marcus Aurelius faced daily, can train focus. He called it the wrestling partner that strengthens your patience. The key isn't to pretend hardship doesn't hurt, but to mine it for meaning. The ultimate leverage comes when you realize adversaries often hand you their own weaknesses disguised as threats. Nero's paranoia made him surround himself with yes men, a flaw Seneca exploited by speaking truth so calmly it couldn't be dismissed as rebellion. Modern manipulators operate similarly. A colleague who undermines you in meetings relies on your reaction to validate their influence. Refusing to engage doesn't mean surrender, it means choosing the battlefield. As Epictetus advised, if someone tries to drag you into a fight, don't resist her, just decline to go. What makes this approach so unsettling to oppressive systems is its unpredictability. Tyrants know how to crush defiance and reward obedience, but how do you control someone who thanks you for the punishment? When the Christian philosopher Justin Martyr was sentenced to death by Roman prefect Rusticus, he shocked the court by calling execution a favor, freeing him from corruption. The Stoic twist: Rusticus later studied Justin's writings, his cruelty undermined by the very steadfastness he'd tried to extinguish. Your struggles today hold that same transformative potential. The project deadline crushing you could be the push needed to streamline your workflow. the criticism that stings might highlight an area ripe for growth. Even systemic barriers, a prejudice, bureaucracy, inequality, can become the friction that sharpens your resolve, because the quiet war's secret weapon isn't resistance, it's alchemy. The kind that doesn't just survive opposition, but transmutes it into fuel. And once you master that flip, no force directed against you will ever land the way they intended. Cato the Younger stood motionless in the Roman Senate as his rivals shouted for his support. They needed his endorsement to pass a populist law, one that would buy short-term loyalty by emptying the treasury. For most politicians, this was an easy trade, immediate influence in exchange for long-term stability. But Cato simply folded his arms and waited. Days turned into weeks. The crowd's cheers became jeers, yet his silence held. What looked like stubbornness was actually a masterclass in Stoic strategy, the deliberate sacrifice of temporary advantage for enduring principle. While others scrambled for scraps of power, he played a different game entirely. History remembers the frantic power grabs of Caesar and Pompey, but it was Cato's glacial patience that exposed their weakness. He understood what modern psychology confirms. Impulsive decisions favor the manipulative, while disciplined restraint favors the strategic. Think of two chess players, one obsessed with capturing every piece, the other quietly positioning for checkmate 10 moves ahead. That's the Stoic long game. When Julius Caesar offered political compromises designed to entrap him, Cato refused to engage, not out of fear, but because he recognized the offer for what it was, a distraction from the larger battle. This approach holds surprising relevance today. Corporate culture glorifies quick wins, quarterly earnings, viral moments, rapid promotions. But beneath the frenzy, true influence still follows Stoic rhythms. Consider the employee who skips the office gossip circle to quietly master new skills. They might miss out on temporary alliances, but when layoffs come, competence outlasts charisma. Or the entrepreneur who builds slowly while competitors chase trends. Like Cato letting his rivals exhaust themselves on petty battles, they conserve energy for what truly matters. The brilliance of Stoic patience lies in its psychological impact. Power-hungry systems thrive on reaction, outrage, flattery, panic. By refusing to participate, you force them to confront their own instability. When Cato starved a corrupt bill of attention, its sponsors resorted to increasingly desperate tactics, revealing their hand. Modern parallels abound. A colleague takes credit for your idea. Document your work meticulously and let their claims unravel naturally. A competitor spreads rumors. Focus on product quality until the market corrects itself. As Marcus Aurelius noted, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Playing the long game requires redefining success itself. For Stoics, victory wasn't about titles or wealth. It was about integrity's compound interest. Cato died by his own hand rather than surrender to Caesar, yet his defiance inspired generations of reformers. Today, that might mean valuing craft over clout, choosing mentors over networks, or measuring growth in decades, not quarters. The tech visionary who avoids hype cycles to refine their invention, the artist who ignores trends to develop a unique style, they're all channeling the same principle. Time magnifies what's substantive and erodes what's superficial. Your most powerful moves often look like inaction to outsiders. While others chase validation through endless activity, the Stoic asks, what can I afford to not do? Which battles strengthen my position and which dilute it? Like a tree prioritizing root growth over visible branches during drought, sometimes the strategic move is to stand still while others rush past. Because history's quietest strategies often echo the longest, not through force, but through the patient certainty that some seeds only bear fruit when others have exhausted their harvest. Stoic humility wasn't about meekness, it was a blade so sharp it could slice through arrogance without its target even feeling the cut. Epictetus, who spent his early years as a slave, saw through the theater of status better than anyone. If someone tells you that so and so speaks ill of you, he advised, don't bother defending yourself. Just reply, he must not know my other faults, or he wouldn't have mentioned only these. That's humility as armor, not denying your flaws, but wearing them so lightly that criticism loses its sting. Imagine a knight stepping onto a battlefield without armor, yet somehow untouched by every arrow. That's what happens when you stop playing the ego's game. History's most oppressive systems, from imperial Rome to modern corporate hierarchies, rely on one unspoken rule, that people will scramble for validation. Tyrants puff themselves up because they need others to feel small, but Stoics like Epictetus flipped the script by refusing to compete. When a wealthy patron mocked his Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, he didn't justify or retaliate. He simply gestured to his few possessions and said, if you think this is poverty, you should see my gratitude. The insult didn't land because there was no target. Humility, in this light, isn't self-deprecation, it's invulnerability disguised as modesty. This plays out with startling clarity in modern conflicts. Picture a boardroom where an executive interrupts you mid-presentation to assert dominance. The instinct might be to duel with credentials or volume. But the Stoic approach, lean into the pause. I appreciate your perspective, let me build on that. Suddenly, the power dynamic shifts. Their posturing looks desperate against your equipoise. Like a judo master using an opponent's momentum, humility redirects aggression into irrelevance. The deeper genius lies in what humility reveals. Arrogance is often a mask for insecurity. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject," he wasn't dismissing feedback, he was exposing the emptiness of performative authority. Today, social media influencers chase viral approval, while Stoic practitioners ask, who are these judges whose praise or blame moves me? That question alone unravels entire systems built on manufactured prestige. Think of a time you witnessed humility disarm tension. Maybe a celebrity shrugged off a rude interview question with humor, leaving the host flustered. Or a teacher admitted not knowing an answer, transforming a classroom's dynamic from performance to collaboration. These moments share a common thread. The person who could have claimed status chose instead to dissolve it. Stoic humility has one final, lethal edge. It deprives manipulators of their favorite weapon, shame. Bullies, whether in ancient forums or modern Slack channels, thrive on provoking self-doubt. But what if you preemptively own your limitations? You're right, I'm still learning this. What's your advice? Suddenly, their barb has nowhere to stick. Epictetus put it best, if you want to improve, be content to appear clueless. In a world obsessed with curating perfection, that willingness to appear unpolished becomes its own kind of power. Because when you stop fearing embarrassment, you become embarrassingly hard to control. Status symbols only hold power when people agree they matter, a truth Stoics wielded like a scalpel. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, slept on a hard bed and ate simple meals, not as performative austerity, but to remind himself that luxury was optional. He wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." With those words, he exposed the absurdity of hierarchies built on titles and trophies. Imagine two paths. One where people scramble over each other for a corner office, the other where someone calmly steps off the ladder altogether. The second option terrifies systems built on competition because it reveals the game was never mandatory. Modern workplaces run on similar illusions. Promotions dangle like carrots, while HR departments meticulously design senior and junior labels to stoke ambition. But what happens when an employee stops playing? A software engineer who codes brilliantly but skips networking events unsettles managers more than a mediocre schmoozer. Like Seneca entertaining guests in his modest home while Rome's elite obsessed over marble floors, they prove that indifference to status isn't rejection, it's redefinition. When a Goldman Sachs analyst famously quit via a public resignation letter titled, "Why I Am Leaving Goldman Sachs," she didn't attack the system, she simply removed her consent from its values. The result, a tremor through Wall Street. This isn't about refusing responsibility or achievement. Stoics distinguished between preferred indifference, things like wealth or titles that could be useful but weren't inherently good, and virtue, which was the only true measure of a person. Marcus Aurelius could have basked in imperial pomp, yet he wrote, "The applause of the crowd means nothing to me. My conscience is my judge." That distinction cuts through modern corporate theater. Consider the professor who publishes groundbreaking research but ignores academic rankings, or the entrepreneur who scales back her company to preserve her team's well-being. Their power comes from recognizing that status is a currency they're free to spend or discard. The most subversive part, indifference, amplifies competence. Seneca noted that desperate climbers often sabotage themselves. When a man doesn't know what port he's sailing to, no wind is favorable. Meanwhile, the employee focused on mastery rather than titles becomes indispensable. A study at a Fortune 500 company found that the least politically engaged engineers were paradoxically the most promoted. Their output spoke louder than networking. Like a Stoic scribe in Nero's court who cared more for his scrolls than flattery, they achieve influence by seeming not to seek it. What makes this approach so threatening to hierarchies is its infectiousness. One executive prioritizing family over face time can unravel years of presenteeism culture. When a celebrity like Keanu Reeves rides the subway or declines lavish premieres, it subtly undermines Hollywood's obsession with exclusivity. Epictetus saw this ripple effect 2,000 years ago. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish. The moment you stop performing status, you give others permission to do the same. So here's the challenge. Where have you confused prestige with purpose? That LinkedIn badge, that job title, that industry award, are they tools or traps? The quiet war isn't fought by tearing down hierarchies, but by revealing their hollowness through sheer irreverence, because the ultimate power move isn't claiming the throne. It's walking past it without a glance. Diogenes carried his home in a barrel and owned nothing but a wooden bowl until he saw a child drink water from cupped hands and threw even that away. His philosophy was disarmingly simple: the less you need, the freer you become. When Alexander the Great, the most powerful man on earth, approached him and asked if he wanted anything, Diogenes merely replied, "Yes, step out of my sunlight." That moment captures Stoicism's most subversive truth: dependence is leverage. The more attachments we have to possessions, status, even relationships, the more handles others have to manipulate us. But strip those away and you become untouchable. This isn't about poverty for its own sake. It's about strategic detachment. Picture a negotiator who cares desperately about closing a deal versus one who can walk away without a second thought. Who holds the power? Diogenes embodied this principle to its extreme, but the lesson scales. When a Roman senator tried to humiliate him by gifting a lavish feast, Diogenes left the food untouched and slept beside it. The next morning, he remarked, "Your attempt to embarrass me failed because I don't value what you value." That's the ultimate disarmament, rendering another's weapons irrelevant by refusing to play their game. Modern life bombards us with manufactured dependencies. Smartphones aren't just tools, they're hooks for advertisers to tug. Job titles come with unspoken expectations: work late, smile through mistreatment, trade integrity for promotions. Even friendships can become leverage when we fear loneliness more than dishonesty. The Stoic antidote: audit your needs ruthlessly. The Roman general Scipio Africanus, after conquering Carthage, kept wearing his old, patched military cloak. When asked why, he said, "I fight better unencumbered. Try this. Identify one dependency that quietly shapes your choices. Is it the approval of a particular colleague? The dopamine hit of social media likes, that designer item you bought to impress people you don't respect? Now imagine loosening its grip, not abandoning it entirely, but reducing its hold." When the billionaire Warren Buffett still lived in his first modest home decades after becoming wealthy, he wasn't being cheap. He was practicing a variation of Diogenes' barrel, proving money couldn't dictate his happiness. The freedom of minimal needs isn't deprivation, it's clarity. Like a hiker shedding unnecessary weight to move faster, every attachment you release removes a potential pressure point. Epictetus, born into slavery, put it bluntly: wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. That's why modern corporations spend billions convincing us we're incomplete without their products. They know a truly self-contained person is their worst customer and a ruler's most formidable subject. So here's the challenge: what's your wooden bowl? The thing you think you need but might just be weighing you down. Start small. Skip one impulse purchase. Let one cutting remark pass without reaction. Cook a simple meal instead of ordering takeout. With each act of intentional reduction, you're not just decluttering your life, you're quietly reclaiming sovereignty. Because the fewer strings attached to you, the harder it becomes for anyone to pull them. Stoic humor wasn't about punchlines, it was precision surgery, exposing absurdity with a scalpel of wit so sharp the target often didn't feel the cut. Take Zeno, founder of Stoicism, who when asked why he owned nothing yet spoke so boldly, quipped, "That's precisely why I can afford to." With 7 words, he flipped the insult into a lesson: true freedom comes from needing nothing. This wasn't comedy for laughs, it was intellectual jujitsu, using mockery to reveal deeper truths without escalating conflict. Musonius Rufus perfected this art under Nero's reign. When the emperor demanded philosophers debate whether his atrocious poetry was divine inspiration, Rufus didn't refuse, he played along with deadly seriousness. "Caesar," he said, "if the gods truly speak through you, we should burn all other books." The court erupted in nervous laughter. Nero preened, and only later did the sting settle. Rufus had exposed the farce while appearing to participate, like a chef serving a banquet where every dish reveals the host's gluttony. He let the tyrant's own excess condemn him. Modern workplaces thrive on similar unspoken absurdities. Picture a manager who demands innovation while rejecting every new idea. The instinct might be to argue or seethe silently. But consider the Stoic alternative. I admire your commitment to consistency. It's rare to see someone uphold tradition so thoroughly. Delivered with earnest tone, it lands as both compliment and indictment. Or when a colleague takes credit for your work, try, "You summarized my thoughts so well, almost like you'd been there from the start." The key isn't sarcasm's bite, but irony's surgical precision. The genius lies in what psychologists call benign violation, a joke that breaches norms just enough to provoke thought without triggering defense. Seneca used this when wealthy patrons mocked his simple meals. "Your feasts require antidotes the next morning, mine require only appetite." He didn't attack their gluttony, he highlighted its consequences. Today, that might look like responding to a toxic positivity mandate with, "I'll bring my authentic self. Should I start with the part that's exhausted?" But Stoic humor had rules. It never targeted the vulnerable, only the pretentious. It avoided malice, focusing on ideas rather than individuals. When a student bragged about memorizing philosophical texts, Epictetus didn't mock his intelligence. He asked, "And have you memorized how to live?" The laughter that followed wasn't at the student's expense, but at humanity's shared folly of mistaking knowledge for wisdom. This approach remains devastatingly effective in boardrooms and group chats alike. A CEO announces another restructuring with empty jargon. Fascinating. I've never heard chaos described so inspirationally. A client insists on impossible deadlines. "I'd love to meet that timeline. Do you have a time turner I could borrow?" The goal isn't to humiliate, but to hold up a mirror, letting recipients see their own contradictions. Like sunlight revealing dust in a room, well placed, which exposes what direct confrontation often can't. The quietest rebellion often wears a smile. While others wage wars of words, Stoic-inspired humor does something far more subversive. It invites people to laugh at the very systems they uphold. And once that laughter starts, the walls of pretension never stand quite as straight again. The Stoics didn't wait for disaster to strike. They invited it over for dinner. This was premeditatio malorum, the ancient practice of deliberately envisioning worst-case scenarios, not to fear them, but to disarm their power. Picture a CEO running fire drills not just for their team, but for their own mind. Marcus Aurelius did this daily, writing, "Begin each day by telling yourself, 'Today I shall meet interference, ingratitude, insolence.' By naming these challenges before they arrived, he stripped them of their surprise." Modern psychology calls this stress inoculation. The Stoics called it wisdom. Consider how differently two employees might face a looming deadline. One obsesses over failure, their mind spiraling through unexamined what-ifs. The other, trained in premeditation, has already visualized the presentation crashing, the client's skepticism, even their own stumbling words, and planned responses for each. The first sees crisis, the second sees checklist items. That's the Stoic edge, transforming the unknown into the familiar. Seneca compared it to sailors rehearsing storms on calm seas. The man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. Corporate culture often mistakes preparedness for pessimism, but Stoic premeditation isn't about expecting failure, it's about eliminating its sting. A sales director might mentally walk through losing their biggest client long before contract renewal talks begin, not to dwell on defeat, but to preemptively diversify their pipeline. Tech founders like Elon Musk famously role-play their company's collapse, not as defeatism, but to spotlight unseen vulnerabilities. As Epictetus observed, it's not what happens that upsets people, but what they think will happen. Premeditation shines light on those shadows. Try this exercise tonight. List 3 professional fears: a project failing, a rival's promotion, public criticism. Now script your ideal response to each. When a Stoic visualized poverty, they didn't panic. They planned how to live well with less. When you imagine a missed quota, don't stop at the fear, design the recovery. Which skills would you sharpen? Which overlooked opportunities might emerge? Like a chess grandmaster studying in games, you're not predicting loss, you're mastering the board in all its possible states. The brilliance of this practice lies in its paradoxical effect. By rehearsing adversity, you don't attract it, you drain its terror. Modern executives pay millions for scenario planning consultants, yet Marcus Aurelius offered the same tool for free. The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, because an artful life requires being prepared to meet sudden and unexpected attacks. Notice he didn't say prevent the attacks, he said meet them. There's a quiet liberation in this approach. Most people spend energy avoiding uncomfortable truths until those truths break down the door. The Stoic knocks first. A startup founder admits their product might flop, then builds a leaner prototype. A manager acknowledges their star employee could quit, then cross-trains the team. Like a fireproof building that burns calmly without collapsing, they withstand shocks because they've already felt the heat in their mind. Seneca's advice to a nervous friend captures this perfectly. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. That's the gift of premeditation. It turns the monsters under the bed into diagrams on paper. Less frightening, more fixable. So tonight, before sleep, ask not just what you hope to achieve tomorrow, but what could go wrong. Then watch how your mornings shift from apprehension to readiness, because the obstacle you've already faced in your mind is no longer an obstacle. It's just another step in the dance. Marcus Aurelius described the mind as an inner citadel, a fortress so well designed that no external chaos could breach its walls. Picture a stone tower standing untouched while storms rage outside. That's the Stoic vision of emotional resilience, not the absence of pain, but the ability to retreat into a space where no insult, failure, or loss can shake your core. He wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." This wasn't poetic escapism, it was tactical psychology. By constructing this mental stronghold, he could govern an empire teetering on collapse while maintaining unshakable clarity. The citadel metaphor works because it's both defensive and adaptable. Unlike rigid walls that crack under pressure, Stoic resilience bends without breaking. Imagine a colleague publicly undermining your idea in a meeting. The instinct might be to lash out or shrink inward, but with an inner citadel, you'd observe the attack like a sentinel on a tower, acknowledging the words without letting them dictate your worth. Epictetus, who endured slavery, framed it starkly. You are the little soul carrying around a corpse. The body might be bound, but the mind remains sovereign territory. Building this fortress starts with identifying what belongs inside and what stays at the gates. Marcus Aurelius filled his citadel with virtues like wisdom and self-discipline, while leaving external validations, praise, status, even health outside as indifference. Modern equivalents might include your core values versus linked-in notifications or a rival's snide comment. Try this visualization. Close your eyes and picture your own citadel. What's permanently housed within its walls? Perhaps your integrity, curiosity, or compassion. Now imagine the drawbridge lifting, leaving fleeting concerns in the moat below. The brilliance of this practice lies in its immediacy. You don't need years of training to retreat inward, just the recognition that the door exists. When Seneca received his death sentence from Nero, he reportedly turned to his grieving friends and said, "Where are your maxims of philosophy? Your preparedness for adversity, even facing execution?" His citadel held. Today, this might look like pausing mid-argument to ask, "Will this matter in a year?" Or refusing to let a bad review define your creative work. Your citadel isn't a prison cutting you off from life. It's the control room where you choose your responses. Modern neuroscience confirms the Stoic insight. The brain's prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational decision-making, can override emotional amygdala reactions if trained. Like Marcus Aurelius journaling each night to reinforce his mental architecture, small habits strengthen these walls. A CEO might start meetings with a minute of silence to reconnect with purpose. A parent could visualize patience as an inner chamber before responding to a child's tantrum. The most subversive part, the stronger your citadel, the less you need to hide within it. Just as secure nations don't barricade their borders, A well-fortified mind engages the world freely, knowing no external event can destabilize its core. That's the quiet power Stoics wielded not by dominating others, but by rendering themselves undominated. So tonight, before sleep, ask, what's one brick you can lay in your inner fortress? Maybe it's a mantra, this too shall pass, a remembered triumph, or simply the resolve to pause before reacting. Because the greatest empires weren't built in a day, and neither is unshakable peace. But every intentional thought is another stone in the wall. Stoic friendship wasn't about networking, it was about forging alliances of the soul. Seneca wrote letters to his friend Lucilius that read like blueprints for connection in a world obsessed with transactions. Ponder for a long time whether you should admit a given person to your friendship, he warned. But when you have decided to admit him, welcome him with all your heart. That distinction cuts through modern relationship myths. Most professional connections today operate like vending machines, insert favors, extract opportunities. But Stoics built bonds on shared growth, not mutual benefit. Picture two climbers tethered together not because they want something from each other, but because they're ascending the same mountain of character. The contrast becomes stark when you examine how Seneca defined true friendship. While Roman elites traded political favors over lavish dinners, he wrote, "A friend is, as it were, a second self." Not a contact, not a stepping stone, a mirror reflecting your best potential. Modern platforms like LinkedIn reduce relationships to connection counts and endorsements, but Stoic bonds measured depth, not digits. When Seneca's mentor Attalus fell ill, he didn't send thoughts and prayers, he moved into Attalus' home to care for him personally. Compare that to today's "let's grab coffee" promises that evaporate when career trajectories diverge. This philosophy exposes a hidden cost of transactional networking, the exhaustion of constant calculation. Ever left a networking event feeling drained despite collecting 20 business cards? That's the toll of relationships built on "what can you do for me?" Seneca offered an alternative. Friendship always benefits, love sometimes wounds. He meant that real connections, even difficult ones, strengthen character, while superficial alliances drain it. Imagine applying this filter to your current circle. Which relationships leave you energized versus depleted? The colleague who challenges your ideas over lunch is practicing Stoic friendship. The one who only appears when needing a reference is not. Practical steps emerge when you view connections through a Stoic lens. First, audit your network like a gardener tending plants. Nurture relationships that encourage virtue, those where honesty flows freely and growth is mutual. Prune those based solely on utility. Next, redefine generosity. Stoics practiced what Seneca called the art of giving without losing, sharing wisdom, time, or introductions without keeping score. Notice how this flips modern networking's quid pro quo. When you offer help without expecting return, you're not being naive. You're building the kind of trust no LinkedIn algorithm can quantify. The ultimate test comes during adversity. Transactional networks crumble when you lose status or resources, but Stoic friendships deepen. When the Emperor Nero turned against Seneca, his true friends risked exile to smuggle his writings to safety. Today, that might look like the former colleague who still takes your call after you've been laid off, or the mentor who advises you even when you can no longer advance their agenda. These bonds survive because they're rooted in something no market crash or corporate reshuffle can destroy: shared commitment to living well. Seneca's letters close with a challenge that still resonates. Associate with those who will make a better man of you. Not richer, not more connected, better. In an age where follower counts masquerade as influence and networking events feel like mutual exploitation markets, the Stoic approach offers radical clarity. Your network shouldn't just advance your career, it should elevate your character. Because when the last promotion is forgotten and the final bonus spent, what remains are the rare souls who knew your value beyond what you could do for them. And that's a currency no algorithm can devalue. Epictetus spent his youth in chains, yet left behind teachings that freed generations. His enslavement wasn't a footnote, it was the forge where his philosophy hardened. Lameness is an impediment to the leg, he'd say, but not to the will. With those words, he drew a line no shackles could cross. Suffering exists, but victimhood is a choice. This wasn't denial. It was the ultimate reclaiming of power, acknowledging oppression while denying it the final say over one's identity. Picture two prisoners in adjacent cells. One obsesses over the injustice, his days measured in grievances. The other studies the cracks in the wall where sunlight enters, tracing geometry lessons in the mortar. Their circumstances are identical, their experiences worlds apart. Epictetus chose the second path. When his owner twisted his leg until the bone snapped, he reportedly remarked, "If you keep going, you'll break it." Then, as the bone gave way, "There, I told you so." The anecdote shocks modern ears. Where's the outrage, the protest? But Epictetus understood what psychologists now confirm. Victim narratives, however justified, often extend the jailer's reach by keeping our focus locked on their crimes. This rejection of victimhood wasn't passivity, it was insurgency disguised as acceptance. Slaveholders relied on predictable scripts, cruelty met with either defiance, which justified harsher punishment, or brokenness, which fed their superiority. Epictetus wrote a third option, by treating his broken leg as a neutral fact, like weather rather than a personal tragedy. He denied his oppressor the satisfaction of seeing him suffer emotionally. Like a martial artist using an opponent's momentum against them, he converted attempts to break him into lessons in unbreakability. Modern life serves up endless invitations to claim victim status. A promotion goes to a less qualified colleague, a partner betrays trust, algorithms feed us content outraging our sense of fairness. The Stoic question isn't, "Did this wrong me?" but "What do I control now?" Consider the employee passed over for a raise. They can dwell on the manager's bias or audit their skills, network strategically, or explore new industries. One approach hands power to the offender, the other reclaims agency. As Epictetus put it, any person capable of angering you becomes your master. Try this reframing exercise with a current frustration. First, describe it using victim language. "My boss undermined me in front of the team." Now strip the emotional charge. "During the meeting, my boss corrected 3 points in my presentation." Finally, add agency. "Next time, I'll anticipate those critiques or request clearer expectations beforehand." The event hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. That's the Stoic pivot from "this happened to me" to "this happened and here's how I'll respond." The brilliance of this approach lies in what it denies to oppressors. Systems of control, whether slavery, corporate hierarchies, or social media algorithms, thrive on predictable reactions. Epictetus' refusal to perform expected anguish disrupted the script. Today, that might look like responding to a bully's taunt with bored amusement, or meeting a layoff not with shame but a calm assessment of severance terms. Victimhood shouts, Stoic resilience whispers, and in that quiet, the jailer's keys jingle uselessly. Your greatest leverage begins the moment you stop insisting life should be fair. Not because injustice is acceptable, but because that insistence keeps you chained to the whipping post. Epictetus knew the body could be bound, but the mind's sovereignty was negotiable only through surrender. So ask, where have you been signing consent forms for your own oppression? not with your hands but with your thoughts, because the quietest revolutions start when someone looks at their chains and says, "These don't define me, my choices do." And suddenly the locks lose their meaning. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal not to record grand conquests, but to track tiny victories, a moment of patience extended, an impulse resisted, a kind word chosen over a clever one. His meditations overflow with reverence for small acts. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one, not tomorrow, not in some dramatic gesture. Today, in the next breath, Stoicism's most subversive insight isn't that greatness requires heroic leaps, but that it's built brick by brick through ordinary moments where no one is watching. Consider how rivers carve canyons. No single drop claims credit, yet the collective work of countless unnoticed currents reshapes landscapes. The Stoics understood influence the same way. When Seneca advised his friend Lucilius to put good days in storage, he wasn't talking about rare triumphs. He meant the daily deposit of disciplined thoughts and actions. A Roman senator rising early to study philosophy before dawn, a merchant choosing honesty over profit, a soldier sharing rations with a prisoner. These micro-resistances added up to a cultural immune system against corruption. Modern research confirms this ancient wisdom. Psychologists call it the aggregation of marginal gains, the phenomenon where 1% improvements compound into transformative change. A programmer writing just 10 lines of clean code daily ends the year with a masterpiece. A manager who listens attentively for 5 extra minutes in each meeting becomes known as a leader who gets people. Even activism follows this pattern. The civil rights movement wasn't built on singular protests but countless small acts of courage. A bus seat taken, a voter registration form filed, a hymn sung softly in a jail cell. Here's the challenge: choose one micro-action today that aligns with your highest principle. Marcus Aurelius would call it planting your virtue. It could be as simple as pausing 3 seconds before reacting to a provocation, or writing one sentence in a journal about where you exercised self-command. Not a manifesto, not a life overhaul, a single brick laid in your inner citadel. The Stoics knew that empires topple when citizens neglect their daily disciplines, and personal sovereignty is no different. The quietest revolutions begin with invisible choices. A CEO who schedules 5 minutes of silence before decisions changes an entire company's tempo. A parent who models calm during a toddler's tantrum rewires generational patterns. Like a stone dropped in still water, these tiny ripples expand far beyond their origin. Seneca observed, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Your next small act of integrity might seem insignificant until you realize it's the first domino in a chain reaction you'll never fully see. Seneca stared at a sundial in his villa garden, counting shadows instead of hours. His essay on the shortness of life wasn't just about time, it was about attention. People are frugal in guarding their personal property, he wrote, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful. That sundial became his metaphor. Most lives cast shadows in directions they never chose. 2,000 years later, modern productivity apps track every minute while leaving users more drained than ever. The Stoic approach to time wasn't about filling slots, it was about aligning each moment with purpose, like an arrow notched perfectly to its target. Consider the paradox of modern efficiency. We cram calendars with back-to-back Zooms, mistake multitasking for mastery, and wear exhaustion like a badge of honor, all while feeling strangely unaccomplished. Seneca diagnosed this centuries ago. Being busy does not always mean real work. He watched Roman elites chase promotions and parties, only to lament on their deathbeds how little they'd truly lived. Sound familiar? The executive who cancels family dinners for emails, the freelancer grinding through weekends to hit arbitrary metrics. They're repeating history's oldest hustle, confusing motion with meaning. Stoic time management begins with a brutal audit. Imagine your schedule as a ledger where currency isn't dollars but life force. Seneca urged readers to track how much gets spent on envy, social media scrolling, empty obligations, networking events that drain you, or appeasing others saying yes when you mean no. Modern tools like time-tracking apps reveal shocking truths. The average knowledge worker spends less than 3 hours daily on deep work, drowned in a swamp of notifications and shallow tasks. The Stoic fix: treat time like a finite resource more precious than gold because unlike money, you can't earn more. Here's where they diverged from today's productivity gurus. While modern culture glorifies hustle, Stoics practiced strategic omission. Marcus Aurelius would begin his day asking, "What is it in myself that I will consult today?" Filtering out noise before it could intrude. Picture two gardeners. One frantically pulls weeds while neglecting the soil. The other dedicates mornings to nourishing roots, knowing blooms will follow. That's the Stoic rhythm, cultivating inner resources first, letting outward productivity flow naturally. A Silicon Valley CEO might brag about 90-hour work weeks, but Seneca would ask, how many of those hours were truly yours? The litmus test lies in deathbed reflections. In his letters, Seneca recounts meeting wealthy landowners who could measure their estates in miles but couldn't account for their years. They're like travelers on a long voyage, he observed, who stay in their cabin arguing about the best seat while the ship sails past every port. Modern equivalents surround us: the entrepreneur who postpones joy until after the IPO, the artist delaying their passion project until retirement. Stoics called this the tomorrow trap, and their antidote was visceral. Live each day as if it could be your last, not through reckless abandon, but by removing all that isn't essential. Practical application starts with redefining urgency. When your phone buzzes with a time-sensitive email, channel Seneca's question: does this concern my character or my calendar? The Stoics divided time into two categories: chronos, clock time, and kairos, meaningful moments. A week packed with meetings might look productive in chronos but empty in kairos. Try this tonight. Review your day not by tasks completed but by moments fully inhabited. Did you truly listen during that coffee chat? Was your mind present when reading to your child? Those are the deposits that compound. The ultimate rebellion against modern busyness is stillness. Seneca spent hours in contemplative walks, believing leisure without study is death. Not meditation apps with stats to track, just pure, undirected thought. Compare that to today's downtime spent doom scrolling. Research now confirms what Stoics intuited. The brain solves its toughest problems not in focus mode, but in showers or strolls. When a junior employee asked Marcus Aurelius how to prepare for leadership, he didn't recommend extra hustle. He advised sitting quietly each morning to remember what sort of world this is. Your calendar is more than a tool, it's a philosophy made visible. Blocking an hour for deep work isn't just scheduling, it's declaring that certain thoughts deserve undivided attention. Turning off notifications after dinner isn't efficiency, it's a boundary against digital colonization of your soul. The quiet war for your time isn't fought with productivity hacks, but by asking, as Seneca did, am I living or just managing the appearance of being alive? Because the busiest people often leave the lightest footprints, their hours evaporate like morning fog, while those who dare to move slowly with intention carve canyons through history. Cato the Younger didn't just walk away from battles, he turned retreat into an art form. While Rome's politicians scrambled for power, This Stoic senator would deliberately remove himself from debates he deemed corrupt, letting his absence speak louder than any speech. His exits weren't surrenders, they were strategic recalculations. Picture a chess grandmaster sacrificing a pawn not out of weakness, but to expose an opponent's overextension. That's the essence of Stoic disengagement, recognizing that some fights drain your resources while doing nothing to weaken your adversary. History remembers Cotto's most dramatic withdrawal during Caesar's rise. While others frantically debated how to counter the populist general, Cotto simply stopped attending Senate sessions. To onlookers, it looked like defeat. But beneath the surface, his absence was a mirror held up to Rome's crumbling integrity. By refusing to participate in what he saw as political theater, he denied the system his tacit approval. Modern psychology calls this nonviolent non-cooperation, the same principle that made Gandhi's hunger strikes and Rosa Parks' quiet refusal so powerful. Not every resistance needs a roar. Sometimes the most subversive act is stepping off the stage entirely. Apply this to today's toxic workplaces or draining relationships. Society glorifies persistence, never quit, slogans plastered on gym walls and startup offices alike. But Stoics measured persistence differently, not by how long you endure, but by why and where you direct your energy. Imagine a talented employee trapped under a micromanaging boss. They could wage a futile campaign to change their manager's personality, or they could channel Cotto. Quietly updating their resume, redirecting effort into skill building, planning their exit while appearing to comply. This isn't cowardice, it's conservation of willpower for battles that actually matter. The litmus test lies in 3 Stoic questions. First, is this conflict within my control? A toxic corporate culture isn't, but your response is. Second, what virtue does this struggle cultivate? Enduring harassment builds resentment, not character. Third, where could my energy create real change? Like Cotto saving his influence for constitutional crises rather than petty Senate squabbles, we must distinguish between skirmishes and wars worth fighting. Disengagement shines brightest when contrasted with modern rage-quit culture. Social media encourages dramatic exits, public resignations, burning bridges. But Stoic withdrawal is ice, not fire. It's the colleague who stops attending optional gossip sessions without announcement. The family member who declines holiday dinners with a polite prior commitment rather than fueling drama. These exits don't just protect your peace, they subtly expose the toxicity's contours by refusing to feed it. Cotto's final retreat was his most profound. Facing Caesar's victorious armies, he chose suicide over surrender, not as an act of despair, but as the ultimate control over his own narrative. While extreme, it underscores the Stoic paradox. Sometimes walking away is the strongest stand you can take. Today, that might mean leaving a lucrative job that erodes your ethics, or ending a relationship that demands you betray your values. The key isn't the action itself, but the clarity behind it. Because when you stop fighting on their terms, you force the world to meet you on yours. Epictetus sat in his simple wooden chair, the same one he'd crafted with his own hands, and asked a question that still rattles boardrooms today. If you wish to be rich, why not consider that you already are? Not because he denied hardship, he'd been a slave, after all, but because he'd cracked the code on desire. Modern corporations spend billions convincing us that enough is always one more purchase away, one more promotion, one more zero in the bank account. But Stoics like Epictetus drew a line in the sand. Wealth isn't about accumulation, it's about recalibration. The moment you define what enough means, you slip the leash of endless wanting. Take the tech billionaire chasing his next billion while sleeping 4 hours a night. Contrast him with the school teacher who bikes home each afternoon to a modest house filled with books and laughter. Who's richer? The Stoic answer hinges on a single distinction. The billionaire still feels poor because his desires outpace his possessions, while the teacher rests in contentment because her needs align with her means. This isn't romanticizing poverty, it's exposing the poverty of perpetual hunger. Seneca, who amassed fortune yet mocked its hold on him, wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." Corporate culture thrives on manufactured dissatisfaction. Social media algorithms amplify envy. Advertising equates self-worth with consumption. The Stoic antidote. Conduct an audit of your enough. Start with the basics: food, shelter, health. Then ask, does a bigger house truly serve you or just your status? Does working weekends for a title you'll barely use align with your values? When Marcus Aurelius ruled the known world, he reminded himself daily, very little is needed to make a happy life, not nothing, very little. The space between those words holds the key. This philosophy terrails consumer economies because contentment can't be commodified. You can't package and sell sufficiency. Look at Patagonia's founder Yvon Chouinard, who capped his company's growth to preserve its ethics, or the FIRE movement adherents who retire early by distinguishing needs from wants. They're modern Stoics in action, proving that freedom isn't found in limitless options, but in clearly defined limits. Try this exercise tonight. List 3 things you're tempted to chase: a job title, a lifestyle upgrade, a social milestone. Now imagine possessing them. Will the craving truly stop or just shift to the next target? Epictetus warned, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things he has not, but rejoices for those he has." That shift from grieve to rejoice is where the quiet war against greed is won. Not by depriving yourself, but by realizing you were never empty to begin with. The ultimate rebellion isn't refusing to play the game, it's rewriting the rules mid-match. When you define your enough, you expose the treadmill for what it is, a machine designed to keep you running, not arriving. And that's when something extraordinary happens. The energy once spent chasing phantom needs gets redirected, maybe into creativity, maybe into relationships. Maybe just into breathing deeply on a Tuesday afternoon, utterly unconcerned with what you lack, because true wealth was never in the vault. It was always in the vantage point. History's Stoic role models weren't just philosophers, they were architects of unshakable character, and their blueprints remain shockingly relevant. While Marcus Aurelius and Seneca dominate modern discussions, figures like Publius Clodius Thrasea, Agrippinus offer masterclasses in quiet defiance. When Nero ordered Agrippinus into exile, his response wasn't lamentation or rebellion, it was a dinner party. As his friends wept, he calmly discussed philosophy between bites, later remarking, "I've always known Nero's whims were as reliable as the weather." This wasn't indifference, it was precision detachment, treating tyranny like background noise rather than the main event. Agrippinus understood what modern psychology confirms: we don't control events, but we dictate their emotional rent. His exile became not a punishment, but a relocation of his classroom. The beauty of studying lesser-known Stoics lies in their relatability. Unlike emperors writing meditations in palaces, figures like Musonius Rufus, banished to a barren island, practiced philosophy while breaking rocks under guard. His letters detail how he turned forced labor into weight training for the soul. Difficulty is the whetstone of virtue. Modern equivalents exist everywhere. That teacher grading papers after hours because her students deserve thoughtful feedback, she's channeling Rufus. The nurse maintaining compassion during back-to-back shifts. Pure Stoic endurance. These aren't ancient saints, they're proof that Stoicism thrives wherever people choose character over convenience. finding modern role models requires recalibrating our hero radar. Social media celebrates ostentatious displays of wealth or rebellion, but Stoic exemplars often operate quietly. Consider the whistleblower who risks career stability to expose corruption without seeking fame, or the small business owner rejecting predatory practices despite competitive pressures. They mirror Arion of Nicomedia, Epictetus' student who transcribed his teacher's words not for glory, but because the world needed them. Look for those who demonstrate what Seneca called the good life, not measured in followers or trophies, but in nights where they can say, "Today I acted according to my principles." Practical steps emerge when we study these figures as mentors rather than monuments. Agrippina's exile teaches us to separate circumstance from identity. A layoff isn't personal failure, but an opportunity to redefine success. Rufus' manual labor echoes in modern gig workers who treat mundane tasks as mental training grounds. Try this: pick one Stoic figure each month, read their surviving words, then identify a contemporary counterpart, perhaps a journalist maintaining integrity despite industry upheaval, or a parent modeling resilience for their children. Journal how their examples apply to your challenges. Did a colleague's unfair criticism sting? Recall how Agrippinus responded to Nero's whims with detached amusement. Facing burnout, channel Rufus' reframe. Obstacles reveal what we're made of. The ultimate lesson from these role models isn't imitation, but inspiration. They weren't perfect. Seneca accumulated wealth while preaching simplicity. Marcus Aurelius waged wars despite valuing peace, yet their struggles humanized their wisdom. Modern Stoics won't wear togas or debate in Roman forums, but they'll recognize the same patterns: office politics as imperial courts, social media as the new Colosseum. Your quiet resistance might look like declining to participate in workplace gossip or choosing measured words during online outrage. Small acts, yes, but so was Agrippina's dinner party. And 2,000 years later, we're still studying its ingredients: poise, perspective, and the courage to save a life while tyrants plot outside. Power structures thrive on predictable reactions. Outrage fuels their narratives, fear justifies their control, and desire for status keeps their wheels turning. But Stoicism flips the script entirely. It doesn't confront oppression head-on, it simply stops feeding it. Imagine a puppet realizing its strings only work when it struggles. The moment it goes limp, the illusion of control shatters. That's the quiet rebellion, winning by refusing to play. Take the modern workplace. A toxic manager might rely on employees competing for crumbs of approval, late nights, performative loyalty, gossip. The Stoic approach: opt out, not with dramatic resignations, but by redefining success. Arrive on time, leave on time, and let your work speak for itself. Suddenly, the managers leverage emotional manipulation. Guilt trips, loses its grip. Like a fire deprived of oxygen, the drama dies without your participation. Seneca saw this clearly. No man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity. The systems that seem unshakable depend entirely on our belief in their importance. Stop believing and their power evaporates. History's most effective resistances often looked like indifference. When Eastern Bloc dissidents under communism adopted living in truth, simply behaving as if they were free, they exposed the regime's fragility. No protests, no manifestos, just people planting gardens, playing band music, and hosting unapproved book clubs. The Stoics pioneered this millennia earlier. Thrasea, a Roman senator, didn't march against Nero's corruption. He just stopped attending Senate sessions. His absence became louder than any speech. This isn't passive surrender, it's strategic disengagement. Social media algorithms thrive on knee-jerk reactions. so the Stoic response is to pause. Corporate hierarchies demand constant hustle, so the rebel works deeply but on their own terms. Even personal relationships shift when you refuse to be baited into old patterns. Like a chess player who declines to chase sacrificed pieces, you win by seeing the trap and stepping around it. Seneca, who navigated Nero's court without losing himself, left us the ultimate key. True freedom is being able to say, "My life is my own." Not because you've overthrown every obstacle, but because you've stopped letting them dictate your inner world. The quietest revolutions don't happen in streets or boardrooms. They unfold in the space between stimulus and response, where the Stoics taught us to plant our flag and declare sovereignty. No battles needed, just the unwavering decision to no longer be moved. The quiet war isn't won with grand gestures or explosive victories. It's fought in the silent moments when you choose detachment over reaction, resilience over complaint, and inner focus over external validation. These are the tools that outlast empires, the ability to see obstacles as fuel, to let silence dismantle manipulation, and to treat your mind as an unassailable fortress. Think of them as a toolkit for modern survival. Detachment doesn't mean apathy. It's the razor-sharp clarity that separates what you control from what you don't. Resilience isn't gritting your teeth through pain. It's the alchemy that turns setbacks into stepping stones. And silence, that's the ultimate power move in a world addicted to noise. This week, pick one principle to test in the wild. Maybe it's pausing 3 seconds before responding to a provocation, or journaling each evening about where you exercised self-command. Don't aim for perfection, aim for awareness. Stoicism isn't a sprint to enlightenment. It's a daily practice like tending a fire. Some days you'll feed it with focus, others you'll barely keep the embers alive. What matters is returning to the work. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire while wrestling with his own flaws, left us this reminder: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect. Now, the quiet war never really ends. It just changes battlefields. Yesterday's tyrants wore purple robes. Today they might wear corporate logos or algorithm-fueled insecurities. But the weapons remain the same: the unshakable resolve to define your own worth, the courage to walk away from empty conflicts, and the wisdom to know that the greatest victories often look like stillness to everyone else. Your armor isn't forged in a single strike. It's hammered into being day by day, choice by choice. So start where you stand. The world's noise will keep shouting. Your job is to listen not to it, but to the quiet voice that knows how to outlast it